Projekt 1065, Chapter 72. Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a few inches shorter than all of his guards. The first thing you noticed about him was his pale face and his long, rat-like nose with that bushy little mustache under it. His brown, dark hair swept down across his forehead to just above his eyes, which were baggy and tired-looking. Maybe it was from the long hours spent running a world war. Or maybe he couldn't sleep for all the bombs the Allies dropped on him day and night. He wore the brown uniform and red swastika armband of the German army, but unlike everybody else in Germany who were so mad for medals that they bought them from shops, Hitler wore only one, the Iron Cross First Class he'd won for bravery in World War I. I knew because I had to memorize this fact to pass my Hitler Youth initiation. Hitler blinked in the bright sunlight of the late winter afternoon like a hedgehog emerging from hibernation. Heil Hitler, Axman cried. We all overcame our momentary astonishment at seeing the Fuhrer in person and threw our right arms in the air. Heil Hitler, we cried. I felt like a traitor, but this was no time to take a stand. I had to pretend to love him the same way everybody else did. Hitler smiled at us like an affectionate old grandfather. Your name, my Fuhrer, is the happiness of youth, Axman said. Your name, my Fuhrer, is for us everlasting life. He was laying it on a bit thick, I thought, but Hitler must have been used to it from everybody he met. He nodded to Axman, which somehow also seemed to communicate that it was time for him to shut up. Axman took the hint and faded back among the towering elite SS guards. Hitler looked out over us. Now each and every one of us really was standing as straight and tall as we could get. Even me. I needed to blend in, it was true, but there was something about the man that made you want to appear perfect in his eyes. Maybe it was fear. We older ones are used up, Hitler said. He spoke so soft at first we had to lean in to hear him, which was a good trick, I realized. We are rotten to the marrow. We are cowardly and sentimental. No, some of the boys called out. Hitler held up a hand to quiet them. It is true. We adults bear the burden of a humiliating past and have in our blood the dull recollection of serfdom and servility. But my magnificent youngsters, he said, gazing out lovingly at all of us. Are there any finer ones in the world? Look at these young men and boys. What material! With you, I can make a new world. This is the heroic stage of youth. Out of it will come the creative man, the man-god, you. A tingle thrilled through me, despite how much I hated him. To hear someone tell you that you will rebuild the world, that you will be a hero, a man-god, was a powerful thing. I wanted to be all that, to do all that, but just not for Hitler and the Nazis. You, my youth, are our nation's most precious guarantee for a great future. Hitler's voice rose as he went on. The 1,000-year Reich. You are destined to be the leaders of a glorious new order under the supremacy of National Socialism. Never forget that one day you will rule the world. The boys around me broke out in spontaneous Sieg Heil. Learn while you are still young that life for you must mean sacrifice. Sacrifice of your personal freedom. Sacrifice of your free time. Sacrifice of many of the small pleasures of life. I turned to look at Fritz, who stood beside me. He wasn't looking at Hitler just then. He had his eyes to the ground just beyond the Fuhrer, as though something Hitler said had him lost in thought. To do so, you must be violently active, dominating, intrepid, brutal. Hitler's voice rose and fell, ebbing and flowing like the Irish Sea. It was captivating, impossible to ignore. Youth must be indifferent to pain. There must be no weakness in you, no tenderness. You must learn to do without, to endure criticism and injustice, to be reliable, discreet, decent, and loyal. You must be as swift as greyhounds, tough as leather, as hard as Krupp steel. I noticed Hitler didn't say anything about being smart. Intelligence had no place in the Hitler Youth, or in Nazi Germany for that matter, but Fritz was nodding emphatically beside me. Whatever he'd been thinking about, he made up his mind. Hitler started in on the tide of the war, how the tide of the war would soon turn in Germany's favor again, and I tuned out. From the corner of my eye, I watched Fritz and Horst and Ottmar and Erhard, the four boys in the science team. They quivered as Hitler spoke, like 5-year-olds, so anxious to open their presents on Christmas morning they were going to puke. They were euphoric, ecstatic. They could barely control themselves. Tears filled their eyes. Not everyone was like that, I realized. Everyone was a little awestruck, but those four looked like they were about to drop to their knees and kiss the ground Hitler walked on. Every time he talked about tossing Germany's enemies back into the sea or smashing the Russians, they were the first and the loudest to shout Heil Hitler. And that's when I finally understood. That's when I knew why Fritz and Horst and Ottmar and Erhard were on the science team, and why I wasn't.